So this video is going to be a very short video about caching, just saving something to cache to avoid running long-running processes all the time. So it's just going to be an example, not an in-depth. So the first thing we want to do, this is a default CakePHP instance. It's basically just running the Cake internal server. We want to create an endpoint to make requests against, so we're going to go cake bake controller, and we're going to call it the cache controller, and we're going to say no actions, and yes, because I've already created one before, but okay, so here we have under src controller, we've got our cache controller. Let's create a public function, and I'm going to call it exec. And just for starters, what we're going to do is going to do an exec command, an ls, and then we're going to use the output of that, set compact, and we just want to take that output variable and set it to the view. And then we know underneath our templates that we need to create a folder with the same name as the controller, the first part of the controller, and create a new file called exec.php, and then we'll might just do pre, and then we want to echo out the output of that exec command, so print output and return is true, and close our tag. And we should, if we hit it, let's try it again, missing method, so we don't want that because that was from me doing another run through. Exec, different method now. Okay, so we can see that that's created a nice output there from, it's an array normally. We could do something like join, and then the separator might be make that, and there we go. And we could even do something simpler, and we might even, before we do that, we might change directory to the web root, and that gives us a shorter listing, which is everything within the web folder here. So that is a start. So we're just pretending to run an operating system command. Let's now tidy this up and move this code into a service class. So let's create, so what we're going to want to do is we're going to say we've got a cache service, and we're going to call it cache here, but we need to create this cache service, so let's go and do that. So in src, we'll create a folder called the service folder, and then I'm going to call it cache service PHP. Now we know that we always need to give it a namespace, so, and it's app service, and we want to say class equals the cache service, and then we say let's go public function, let's create an entry point called run, and return the output here. Now this, once we've created that, we've got to pull it in at the top, so we say use the cache service, and then we can say okay, set that variable to cache run, and I think from there, if we've done it correctly, we will have an error because we need, this is looking to pull it in from the dependency container, so we need to tell CakePHP about that. So we need to go into src application, into the services method of application PHP, and then we just need to say, well, okay, add the container here, and it's cache service. So there it is down there, just scroll down, and basically the ID is a string, which is the same as the class name. So from now, what should happen is we've got auto pull in that value. So now we can see that we've got this output displaying in the browser, but it doesn't really show us how long running a long running process. So let's change this a bit, and we'll make this into, we're going to say sleep for 6 seconds, and then echo hello. And let's now see what happens there. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and a bit more, and there we go. Okay, so that's a long running process. So if we were to request that from the browser each time, it would be just a long, boring wait. So what we now want to do is we want to create, let's create another function here, public function long running process, and we want to return the output. Alright, so now what we want to do is we want to start using CakePHP cache class. Now there's a lot of different methods. There's add, read, but the one we're going to look at is remember. Now this is special because basically if it's already in the cache, it will just return it, but if it's not in the cache, it will call a function to add it to the cache. So let's do that. So we're going to call this the long running key. We're going to give it a key. Now the callable is, we're just going to create a simple function which is this long running process, and we need to return that, and we also need to return here as well. So pull from the cache, but if it's not in the cache, now we can go very obviously, is it hitting the cache? Let's make that obvious. So we're going to hit this, and we're going to dump and die. And as you can see, there's nothing in the cache, so it's not running. So let's comment that out, and now run it. And we see it's going to take 6 seconds to give us a value, but then if we run it again, it's mostly immediate. So that is saving a value in the cache and then calling it back using the remember method. Where is it stored? Let's have a look in our temp directory, and there's a cache folder. Now you can see the key that I've got here is now cake long running. So if we have a look at that, so cat cake, what's inside it, and we can see the output is stored as a serialized JSON, I think it is. So that has now saved it to the cache. What other things, or how do we configure the cache? Let's have a look at that. So to configure the cache, we open our app PHP file, and we need to scroll until we find the cache key, and by default this is the one that's being used, and you can tell because if I do this, and then now this might be embarrassing, but let's see. No, it's working. Good. So if we now go back to our folder here, we can see that we've made a change here to the default. This is the one that's used by default. But what we can also do, we can create another one. Let's call it the well, exec one. Call it exec. Probably not a good idea to use system names for things, but you get the point. Now this is where we can start to configure, and we can say, okay, this cache is going to expire in a minute. Well, why don't we try 10 seconds? I don't know if that's going to work, but let's see if we can do. So we've now configured our own cache with our own configuration options, plus how long we want it to last before it expires. Now we want to go in here and say, okay, instead of using using the default cache, how about you now, so if you look at the remember here, it's got a config, use the exec config instead of the default one. So let's try that again. So it's waiting to hit the cache, it's waiting for the long running process to finish, and it's finished. And now we go again, and if we go and back and have a look in here, we can see we've got that new cache file in our cache directory. Now we did set this so that it was duration's 10 seconds. Now it therefore should now take the long time because it's expired. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So yeah, so the cache is expired, and it will take the long time to do because it's a long running process. But if I try it again within the cache period, you can see that it's hitting the cache, but then it'll expire after 10 seconds. And so you can see how you can really configure things the way you want them to run. So that is a very short view of implementing caching. Just one thing to note is because you're using Cake's caching class, that you can now use a bunch of different engines like Redis or Memcache, and you won't have to do a lot of changes to code because it's abstracted using Cake's cache methods. So I hope this video is useful to someone.